First, from convicted terrorists who have refused to engage in de-radicalisation programmes, and second, those plotting attacks in cyberspace. More on that in a moment.
We begin with a Sky News investigation, which has learned that nearly 3/4 of terrorists convicted since 9/11 are now back on the streets. Our Home Affairs correspondent Mark White has this special report.
It is one of the UK's biggest emerging security threats, and it's one the authorities don't particularly like to talk about. Hundreds of convicted terrorists now out of jail and back on our streets, many still committed to violence. Over the past 15 years, since the 9/11 attacks in America, more than 580 people here in the UK have been convicted of terror offences. The vast majority, 3/4, have now served their sentences and been released from prison. But around 2/3 of those refuse to engage with prison de-radicalisation programmes aimed at addressing their extremist behaviour. Among those released, 3 men who helped the 4 suicide bombers bring carnage to the London transport system in 2005. 7 men convicted for their part in the failed attack 2 weeks after the London bombings are also released, then jailed again last month on extremism charges. This centre in East London engages with local youngsters to counter the extremist message of groups like ISIS. The programme's founder says the government's anti-extremism policy in prisons is failing miserably. It relies on prison imams to engage with terrorist inmates.
There are experts out there that are equipped and able to tackle the problem, but they're not the ones that are doing it in prisons. At the moment, the prison imams, God bless them, but they're not adequate and they're not experienced enough to tackle the problem of radicalisation within prisons.
It is the police and security services who are now increasingly faced with having to monitor hundreds of the Al-Qaeda generation offenders who are now back on the streets. Scotland Yard's head of counter-terrorism until last January has a stark warning for the years ahead. While the vast majority of those convicted of Al-Qaeda-related terrorism have not engaged in de-radicalisation programmes, at least some did. The same, he says, cannot be said of the ISIS generation.
There are very few indeed, ISIS convicted terrorists who have reformed. It's almost as if this particular perversion of Islam is so potent that once somebody is brainwashed with this ideology, it almost feels like it's irreversible. And there are very few examples around the world of where somebody has rejected ISIS ideology, having subscribed to it before.
And the continued refusal of many terror offenders to engage with de-radicalisation programmes runs the real risk that significant numbers will rejoin society in the years ahead with the same extremist beliefs